welcome to Berkshire Guitar Amplifier Repairs. Stuart Smith with you as always, and today we're going to be looking at biasing the Marshall JCM800 lead series. I haven't done a video on this one before. I'm not going to waffle on because I know you're watching this video because you want to know how to bias it. So let's just get straight down to it and find out how to bias this amp. Okay, here we are, top side of the amp, and we have 5 preamp valves, a pair of EL34s. I'm sure you know these are the HT smoothing caps, mains transformer, output transformer, choke. These EL34s are quite old, I think. They don't even have any legend on them, so I'm not quite sure what the provenance of those is. But anyway, what I'm going to do now is get a couple of bias meters up on these EL34s. Then we'll flip the amp over and I'll show you how to adjust the bias. If you've only got one bias meter, don't worry, just do one valve, do the bias. With a matched pair, they should be the same, but if you want to, swap the bias probe onto the second one and just double check that this one's within 2, 3, 4 milliamps of this one and you're good to go. I'm probably going to put a new pair of EL34s in this amp. I've checked all of the preamp valves on my tester and they're all good, so there's no point in changing those. I think I will though pop a new pair of EL34s in there. So anyway, let's get the bias meters connected up and then we can have a look at what the bias is at the moment. So I've got a couple of bias probes attached to the valves now. I'm sure you know, but the probe just plugs into the socket and the valve plugs into the probe. You can buy cheaper ones than this, but I like these Eurotube bias probes. They're very good. So if you're going to bias your amp in the future, I would just invest in one of these. They're, I don't know, $130 or something. I've got about 4 of them. So there you go, and next we'll turn the amp on and see what the current bias is. It should be around, I don't know, 35 milliamps ish. I'll look up the exact amount, but we're looking for something like 35 milliamps. So let's power up and see what happens. Here we go. Turn on. These are very hard to see, these probes, with the camera because they've got very faint LED lights. Not sure if you can see that. Anyway, it's 443 plate volts, the same as this one here. There you go, you see just that 442, and we should see the plate current increasing. There it is, look, 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So they're both coming up, both valves are warming up. My gut feeling is the bias is a bit low on this. That's not coming up as fast as I would expect to get to 35 milliamps. My guess is it's going to stop at about 20. The good thing is we have a matched pair here. This one, if you can read it, is 21 and this one is currently 19. So that bias is quite low. I'm now just going to look up what the bias should be for a 430 plate volts with EL34. So let's do that next. I get my bias information from a bias calculator online, and it's at tedweber.com, tedweber.com. And they've got this handy bias calculator. So basically you set the class of the amp, which is almost always AB for our guitar amps. Pick the tube type, look, EL34, there we go. And then we want the plate voltage, which I'm just reading off now at 430. 430 volts, like that. Now just go, having done that, calculate bias and up it will come. That's higher than I thought. I said 35, I think it's 40. So basically it's looking for 40 milliamps. I think I'm going to bias a little bit on the cold side at 36, 37 when I put the new tubes in. So I think the next thing to do is to get the new tubes in and see if the biases are actually changed and how close it is to this expected 40 milliamps. Okay, I've had a word with the customer and he doesn't want new power valves, so we'll go with these valves here. They're working okay. He doesn't play the amp very often, so he doesn't want to invest in a new pair. So what we'll now do then is flip the chassis upside down, and I'll show you where the bias pot is for this amp. And here we are on the underside of the amp, and this is the bias pot right here. Nice and clear. Not actually labelled bias, it's labelled R1 just there. So we can put a screwdriver in there. I've got my bias meters down here. So I'll put the screwdriver into the pot, and it seems to be clockwise for increased bias, so we'll just turn that up to about, I think, 35, 34, and you see there's a slight difference between them, 33 and 37. That's okay. Ideally they should be exactly the same, but 3 or 4 milliamps difference makes no difference whatsoever to anything. And there you go, job done. Clockwise to increase the bias, anti-clockwise to decrease. If the bias is out of range, in other words you can't get enough range on there, that's the resistor to start tinkering with. You can see it's in series with the pot look. So just increase or decrease that resistor. But I've never had to do that. Hopefully the pot will give you the range you want. And that's it, they settle down to 37 stroke 38 and 33, and that's fine. All good really. So we'll get the amp back together and wrap up the video. Okay, there you go, fairly straightforward because Marshall have conveniently provided a bias pot for us to twiddle. I wish that was always the case, but it isn't. So you can now with confidence bias your own Marshall JCM800. And remember, if you've only got one bias probe, just swap it between the two positions. You don't need an expensive bias probe like I've got. There are some quite cheap ones which you can just use with a multimeter. But if you are going to be biasing amps, I would invest in a decent bias probe, and the ones from Eurotubes I found them to be absolutely excellent. Alright, there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you again.